This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
By your unbelief. He's not limited by your unbelief or by your circumstances. Even if you have trouble believing that God can do something that incredible, that doesn't limit you. Even if you don't believe that God can do it, that doesn't limit God. It didn't matter that Sarah didn't or couldn't believe. God said it would happen, and He even put it on the calendar. It didn't matter that the Israelites feared for their lives. God knew what He was up to. Now note that God may choose not to respond because of one's lack of faith. The Bible does teach that, but He's not limited to your lack of faith. I love this story in the Bible where Jesus encountered a father that asked Jesus to heal his son. His son had severe seizures. And the father asked Jesus, and this is the quote from the father, says, "If you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." And I love how Jesus responded. Look at this in Mark chapter 9, verses 23 and 24. If you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus says, if you can? Did you just say, if you can do anything? That's what Jesus was saying. Jesus said, did I hear you right? Did you just say, if you can do anything? Did you just say, if I can do anything? Is that what you just said? Because if that's what you just said, you need to know something. Everything is possible for him who believes. What Jesus was saying is, you may not believe, but I believe. Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help overcome my unbelief. And Jesus healed him. He wasn't limited by the father's unbelief. See, even when you are like that father, you want to believe and you believe a little bit, but you still can't completely believe. Jesus says, I know. I know. And in your unbelief, God isn't limited. And Jesus healed him. Romans 3, verses 3 and 4 says, what if some did not have faith? Will their lack of faith nullify God's faithfulness? Not at all. God is not limited by your circumstances. He's not limited by your unbelief, and He's not limited by the requirements of your circumstances. Again, referring back to Abraham and Sarah. Sarah was too old. Even Abraham wondered if he was too old to get pregnant. For her to get pregnant. Genesis 17:17. Genesis 17:17. He says, "Look, this can't possibly happen. I'm an old man. I'm 100 years old. She's 90 years old. Come on." But God doesn't think in probabilities. I doubt if God's ever even used the word probably. God thinks of the impossibilities, and He considers them possibilities. That's exactly how God thinks about you. He's not limited by the probabilities or the impossibilities. He doesn't want you to think that way either. Now this is so important, don't get possibility thinking confused with positive thinking. Probability thinking dwells on the present and it's rooted in the past. Positive thinking is an attitude that focuses on things that you want to happen. Possibility thinking is focusing on what God wants to do. Big, big difference. You see, God's possibilities aren't dependent on man's probabilities. God's possibilities aren't dependent on man's probabilities. Do you know the story of Joseph in the Bible? His brothers they were envious of him, jealous of him. They throw him in a pit. They sell him to some traders that were coming by, and they take him to Egypt. And he was separated from his family, his homeland. His owner falsely accused him of trying to rape his wife. He was sent to prison for something he didn't do and forgotten. The probability was that he would die there. But he continued to trust God. And God began to open doors. It wasn't long before Joseph was put in charge of the prison, and he was the prisoner in charge of the prison. Look at that. Only God could work something like that out. And eventually Pharaoh discovered Joseph's worth, and he puts him to work. And under God's providence, Joseph, the prisoner, was eventually put in the position of what we would call today the prime minister. And as it has happened in history many, many times, when countries around Egypt were suffering severe drought, Egypt had food, mostly because of the fertile soil around the Nile. And sure enough, there was this drought, and Joseph's brothers came looking for food, having no idea what had happened to Joseph. And he recognized them, but they had no idea who he was. And he provided food and supplies, and eventually the truth came out of who he was. And Joseph made this amazing statement, Genesis chapter 50, verses 19 and 20. Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what's being done, a saving of many lives."
Looking for a Bible study that's focused on the practical application of the Bible? Check out our website at theopenclass.com.
By your blood, and it's only through your word.